The voicemail came in at 2:17 a.m. I was half asleep, phone face down on my nightstand, buzzing endlessly. When I finally picked it up, all I saw was the contact name. Mom. And beneath it, one new voicemail. I didn't even listen right away. I had a rough day, a long week actually. The kind of week where you start questioning your whole life. But when I finally played the message, something in me went cold. You're out of the family business, her voice said, clipped, firm. Expect a call from our lawyer. No explanation. No hesitation. Just like that. Like I was some outsider. I didn't call her back. I didn't argue. I didn't even ask why. Instead, I replied with 2 words. Understood. That was it. No drama. No shouting. No last-minute attempts to patch things up. Maybe I was too tired. Or maybe, deep down, I had seen this coming. The signs had been there for years, small cracks that widened over time. A growing rift between me and my family, especially my younger brother, Ryan. He was the golden child. Always knew how to say the right thing, how to charm his way through anything. And he always had my parents' ear, even when it meant stepping over me. But here's what they didn't expect. I wasn't going to sulk or beg. I had options. I quietly called my lawyer, pulled out the paperwork, and sold my 40% share of the family company. It wasn't easy, emotionally. But financially? Let's just say I made sure it was clean, legal, and irreversible. Within 48 hours, the deal was closed. Done. Gone. That's when everything exploded. 72 missed calls. Texts flooding in. Voicemails piling up from numbers I didn't even recognize. And right in the middle of it all, Ryan. Begging. Pleading. Please, man, we didn't mean it like that. You need to undo this. Talk to Mom, please. This is serious. Now they were panicking. Now, suddenly, I was important again. But they had no idea what they had done, or what they had lost. See that 40%? It wasn't just numbers. It was leverage. It was influence. It was history, decades of sweat, ideas, and long nights poured into that business. And the person I sold it to? Well, let's just say it wasn't someone my family would ever want sitting at the table. Funny how things change. But I wasn't laughing. Not yet. Because the calls were just the beginning. And what came next? Even I didn't see it coming. I didn't pick up any of the calls. Not one. I just sat there on my couch, staring at the screen as it lit up again and again. Most of them were from Ryan, a few from Dad, and even one from a number I hadn't seen since college, an old friend of the family who used to handle some of our PR. That one surprised me. Why were they calling? But I already knew the answer. Word was spreading. Fast. And not in the way they wanted. To understand why this all blew up, you need to know what our family business really was. My grandfather started it in the late 70s, a chain of automotive supply stores that later expanded into distribution. By the time I was born, it had grown into a regional powerhouse. My dad took over in the 90s, made some smart moves, and turned it into a national name. When I was younger, I thought it was something to be proud of. I used to follow my dad around during the summer, watching him take calls, run meetings, sign deals. He taught me a lot, until Ryan came along. Ryan was 7 years younger, and for whatever reason, my parents saw him as the future of the company. I never really resented that at first. I figured we'd both have a place in the business. But over the years, it became clear that my input mattered less and less. Every idea I brought to the table got watered down or flat out dismissed. Meanwhile, Ryan would roll in late to meetings, crack a few jokes, and somehow get praised for thinking outside the box. It got worse when my dad semi-retired and left most of the day-to-day to us. Except us slowly turned into him. The last 2 years were the most brutal. Tension in board meetings. Backhanded comments. Even budget decisions were made behind my back. I tried to bring it up with Mom, but she'd always say something like, "Ryan's just young, give him time." Or, "You need to learn how to work with him." It became clear she was backing him completely. Dad too, though he stayed quieter about it. I kept pushing through, thinking maybe I was overreacting. But then came the real blow. Last month, I found out Ryan had been negotiating a massive supplier deal without telling me. A deal that would have shifted the company's long-term strategy and locked us into contracts for the next 5 years. I confronted him about it in front of the board. He laughed it off. Said I didn't understand the vision. That was the moment I knew. I was just a name on paper to them now. So when the voicemail came, I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just felt done. But here's the thing. I didn't sell my share to just anyone. I sold it to a competitor. A very sharp, very calculated firm that had been circling our business for years. They knew our weaknesses. They'd studied our growth, our missteps. And now, they had a seat at the table. And my family? They were only just beginning to realize what that meant. It didn't take long before I got the first email from the new stakeholders. The subject line was short. Introductory Review and Strategy Proposal. I clicked it open, half expecting a wall of corporate talk, but what I saw made my chest tighten. They weren't wasting time. They'd already analyzed internal systems, proposed a restructuring of the leadership team, and flagged multiple efficiency gaps, most of which just so happened to involve decisions Ryan had made over the past year. It was cold, precise, and brutal. The company my grandfather built was now being dissected like a science project, and the people doing it didn't care about our family legacy. They cared about numbers, margins, control. And I handed them the keys. I didn't feel guilty, though. Not yet. I felt numb, tired, and maybe a little curious to see how far Ryan would fall before he realized how deep the hole was. That night, my phone rang again. Ryan, of course. I let it go to voicemail. But then came a message from someone I didn't expect, Marcy, our lead accountant, who had worked for the company longer than Ryan had even been out of college. Her voice trembled as she said, "I'm not sure what's going on, but they're asking for financial reports I've never had to prepare before." "Did you really sell your share? Is this permanent?" It hit me then, this wasn't just shaking up the boardroom. People like Marcy, people who had stayed loyal through hard years and tight budgets, were scared. This wasn't a petty family fight to them. This was their livelihood. At the same time, I couldn't ignore what had been happening behind the scenes for months. There were rumors, ones I'd dismissed before, that Ryan had been using company funds to bankroll a side venture with one of his friends. A high-risk real estate deal that had quietly tanked. Nobody had confronted him directly, but a few employees had whispered about it over coffee or during late office nights. I had no proof, no paper trail, but the timing made too much sense now. What if that was why Mom cut me off so suddenly? What if she knew, or worse, helped cover it up? I started going back through old emails, contracts, anything I still had access to. And buried in one of my shared drives was a forwarded document from 3 months ago, something I wasn't even supposed to see. A wire transfer. A large one. Authorized by Ryan. The recipient? A company I'd never heard of, but a quick search revealed it was tied to his college roommate, a guy with a sketchy business past. I didn't know what I was going to do with that yet, but the pieces were clicking into place. Fast. And while Ryan was blowing up my phone, desperate to undo the sale, I knew he wasn't just worried about losing control. He was worried about being exposed. And I hadn't even told him what I'd found. The next day, I got an email from my mom. No greeting. No signature. Just one line. "What you did was reckless and selfish. You've embarrassed this family." I stared at the screen for a long time. Not angry. Just disappointed, though not in myself. I realized then she still didn't get it. After everything, she still thought this was about pride. Or spite. She didn't see that I'd been pushed into a corner for years, treated like a silent partner while Ryan ran wild with zero accountability. Now that the fallout had started, they were scrambling to rewrite the story, like I'd betrayed them out of nowhere. But they never asked why I stopped fighting back. They just assumed I'd keep playing my part forever. That night, I met up with Ben, an old friend who used to work in our legal department before he quit over ethical disagreements. We hadn't talked in months, but he was one of the few people I still trusted. I showed him the document I found, the wire transfer, and told him what I suspected. He looked at it, quiet for a while, then said, "I heard rumors too, but nothing this solid. If this is real, Ryan's in trouble. And if your mom knew about it and said nothing, they both are." Ben leaned back, his tone more serious now. "You need to decide what you're really after here. Do you want revenge, or are you trying to save what's left of the company?" I didn't answer right away. I didn't even know anymore. The next morning, the board called an emergency meeting. I wasn't invited, obviously, but word got to me through a friend on the inside. The new stakeholders had started pushing for a forensic audit. Everything was about to be laid bare: spending records, contracts, personal expenses that had been filed under vague budget lines. Ryan was trying to delay it, but he was outnumbered now. He'd lost his grip, and he knew it. Just before the meeting started, I finally answered one of his calls. I don't even know why. Maybe I wanted to hear his voice. Maybe I just wanted to see how far he'd fallen. He sounded exhausted. "Look, I know we've had our differences," he began, trying to sound calm. "But you selling your shares like that, it's hurting everyone. Not just me. The employees, the brand, our family name. Cut to the point, Ryan," I said flatly. There was silence on the line. Then he said it. "I need you to talk to them. To the buyers. See if there's a way we can buy it back, reverse the deal. Or just slow things down." I could hear the desperation in his voice, the cracks forming in his confidence. But he still didn't admit anything. Not about the wire transfer. Not about the shady deal. Not about the way he pushed me out. He was still clinging to the idea that this could all be fixed with a few polite conversations. But it was too late for polite. And what he didn't know was that the audit had already started. 2 days after that call, I got an unexpected visitor. I was in the middle of answering emails when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and for a second, I thought maybe Ryan had gotten desperate enough to show up uninvited. But when I opened the door, it wasn't him. It was Jenna, my cousin. We hadn't spoken in over a year. She used to handle some of the HR work at the company, until she suddenly quit without much explanation. I always figured it had something to do with internal drama, but no one ever talked about it. She looked nervous, eyes darting around like she wasn't sure she should even be there. "Can I come in?" she asked softly. Once we sat down, she didn't waste time. "I know you're not exactly on speaking terms with the family right now," she began, "but I need to tell you something. I think you're in more danger than you realize." That got my attention fast. She pulled out a USB drive and handed it to me. "This has copies of emails I saved from the company server. I shouldn't have taken them, but something didn't feel right. Ryan was moving money around months ago. But it wasn't just the wire transfer. There were internal memos, stuff you'd never see unless you had HR clearance. Severance agreements, NDAs, payout authorizations, tied to employees who were quietly fired or paid to stay quiet. I plugged the drive into my laptop and scanned through the files. My stomach dropped. There were at least 6 signed NDAs from former employees. All processed through the same discretionary budget. The amounts were large, too large for anything routine. Jenna explained further. They were all women. Most of them left within 6 months. One of them, Natalie, she came to me in tears. Said Ryan had crossed a line. She was scared and didn't want trouble, but she didn't want to stay there. Weeks later, she was gone, and suddenly there was a big bonus listed under exit incentives. I reported it to Mom. She shut me down. It hit me like a punch to the chest. This wasn't just bad management or shady accounting. This was serious. Criminal, even. And my mom? She knew. She buried it. Just like she always covered for Ryan. That's why she cut me out. That's why the voicemail came out of nowhere. I'd been getting too close without even realizing it. Selling my shares wasn't just a business move, it was a threat. Because if someone else got access to the books and didn't have family loyalty clouding their judgment, all of it would come out. And now it was already happening. I leaned back in my chair, heart racing. Everything suddenly made sense, and it was worse than I ever imagined. The board, the new owners, the audit, they weren't just about to uncover bad leadership. They were about to blow the lid off something much darker. And I wasn't sure my family could survive it. The next week felt like watching a dam crack in slow motion. Word had started spreading through the company, quiet rumors, nervous looks, hushed conversations in hallways. The forensic audit team wasn't just digging through numbers anymore. They had started interviewing staff, asking questions about policy violations, off-the-record deals, and hush money. People who had once stayed silent were suddenly speaking up. The fear that used to keep them in line had shifted. Now they were afraid of being complicit. Ryan had gone completely silent. No more calls. No texts. Nothing. It was strange. Almost like he vanished. But I knew better. He was scrambling. Trying to cover his tracks or make deals behind the scenes. The worst part was, he still thought he could talk his way out of it. I got the call late Friday afternoon. Ben, my lawyer friend, had been looped into the investigation by one of the new board reps. His voice was calm but serious. They're preparing to hand over everything to the authorities. There's evidence of embezzlement, misuse of company funds, HR violations. And your mom? She signed off on some of the payouts. Whether she knew exactly what they were for, that's still being determined. But the signature's there. I should have felt relief, but I didn't. I just felt heavy. Tired. Like the weight of years of dysfunction was finally catching up to all of us. The legacy my grandfather built, one of hard work, trust, and loyalty, had been twisted into something toxic. And now it was all crashing down. That night, I got one final call from Ryan. I almost didn't answer. But something in me needed to hear what he had to say. His voice was flat. Hollow. They're going to press charges. I know it. The board won't even talk to me anymore. And Mom, she's lawyering up. Blaming me for everything. I stayed quiet. I just wanted to make things better, he said quietly. I thought if I could grow the company faster, make the numbers look good, maybe they'd respect me the way they respected Dad. You didn't need to be respected, I finally said. You needed to be responsible. He let out a bitter laugh. You always were the good son, huh? No, I said. I was just the one who knew when to walk away. There was silence on the line, and then he hung up. That felt like the end. But it wasn't. The next morning, I got an email from one of the board's external investigators. It had one attachment, a scanned letter. Handwritten. From my grandfather. Dated almost 30 years ago. It was addressed to me. Somehow, he'd seen the cracks even then. He warned about what could happen if greed and pride took over the family. He made it clear, if things ever got that bad, I had the right to do what was needed to protect what he built, even if that meant tearing it all down. I stared at the letter stunned. The final twist? I hadn't just walked away. I'd fulfilled his last wish. After reading my grandfather's letter, I sat quietly for a long time. Everything that had happened, the betrayal, the silence, the implosion of our family's legacy, it all suddenly felt less like a collapse and more like a release. Like a truth that had finally surfaced after years of being buried. I didn't feel like I'd won anything. This wasn't revenge. It was just necessary. The company was taken over fully by the new investors. Ryan officially stepped down after pressure from the board, and the investigation led to formal charges. Embezzlement, fraud, and multiple HR violations. My mom's name was included in some of the filings, but the investigators eventually concluded she had been negligent more than directly involved. Still, her reputation took a serious hit. She resigned from the board in silence, no public statement, no farewell. Just vanished from the spotlight, like she was hoping no one would remember her role in all of it. Jenna, my cousin, was offered a position back in the new HR department. She declined. Said she'd had enough of corporate politics to last a lifetime. Instead, she started working with a nonprofit that protects whistleblowers. I couldn't have been prouder of her. As for me, I didn't try to get involved with the company again. I knew my time there was done. I used the money from the sale to start something smaller, something clean. A local business incubator focused on helping young entrepreneurs who didn't have family names or connections. Just ideas and grit. It felt like the right way to honor what my grandfather truly believed in, building things that mattered, with people who cared. I never spoke to Ryan or my mom again. There were moments I thought about it. Wondered if time would make space for healing. But some wounds don't need to be reopened. Sometimes the best closure you can get is simply walking away with your integrity intact. I still drive by the old office sometimes. It looks the same from the outside, but I know everything inside has changed. New leadership. New policies. A fresh start. People like Marcy and others who stayed through the storm told me things feel different now. More stable. More human. And that's all I ever really wanted, for people to be treated fairly. For the legacy to be more than a name on the wall. So when people ask me what happened, why I sold, why I walked away, I tell them this: sometimes the hardest thing you can do is nothing. But when silence turns into enabling, and loyalty becomes a shield for corruption, walking away isn't weakness. It's strength. I didn't lose my family business. They lost me. And in the end, I didn't just protect my grandfather's legacy. I reclaimed it.